I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're talking about saving your relationship, saving your marriage. You fell in love with that someone all those years ago. Why can't you be in love with them again? Well, a simple phrase might help you out. It's, "You're right, I'm wrong." It's also the name of a book written by Jeff Marinelli, "You're Right, I'm Wrong." It's a terrific book. It's encyclopedic in its knowledge. It is a blueprint on how to strengthen your relationship, salvage your relationship, and come together once again with that person you love. Jeff Marinelli, we are delighted to have you here today as a guest on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
My
And
pleasure. I love the fact that you are very clear in your outline for this book. It's not just platitudes, it's actually putting down concrete steps of what you need to do to have a better relationship.
I took a long time to write this book. It was a 10-year process to write it, and I used a lot of people's input to it. I'm an individual that loves collaboration, and I wanted to make sure to write such a book for the alpha person, because I ended up removing the he and she out of the entire book because it's for all really partnership and relationships. But starting with just mine, it was a baseline, like you said, the blueprint to really have a powerful relationship. And it's the daily things that we forget about, that this book really gets into the practicality of how to live a life with your partner. The tools that when we go into a company or a business or an opportunity, we're always reading the 101 for dummies, and we're always reading the textbooks to really understand anything we get into. But one of the things we never really have a book for, a real blueprint book for, is our partnered relationship. What I decided to do is being married to a woman who has sold 7 companies, very powerful, deals with some of the top players around the world, and so her expectations of me are extremely high. But at the same time, we're inseparable and together all the time, and the love for each other is unbelievable, and it's consistent. So this book really gets into, I decided to write this book as a practical book, as a blueprint book. And that is, as you go through this book, it broke it up into 3 parts, where relationships go wrong, and then the second is basically understanding the needs, both from yourself and from your partner. And then the third is the actual tools to apply. And not only do I give you the tools, I actually give you the ability to question yourself in this book. So it's a real rooted book on understanding yourself.
I love how on your website, the website's on your screen right now, it's you'rrightimwrong.co. And you ask a simple question. Your spouse is angry with you. He or she goes into the other room. Do you let them just work through their feelings, or do you go and say, "I'm sorry"? And you say the correct answer is, Jeff, I'll let you explain the scenario.
Well, a lot of guys are just leave my partner cool down, let them, unwind. And and what happens is we find ourselves in that unwind. And then for the next 3 days, I kid about this in the book, as adult men, we're in our own house with our partner because they just stay in the room, or you're walking by them and you don't even have a conversation after a knockdown drag out. For the next 3 days, you're almost a captive in a home, about walking by a woman you don't even know, or a partner. And the goal is, I say, you knock on the door, and you apologize. And as a guy, an individual is like, I'm not going to apologize if I'm not wrong. So what I say is, you're not knocking on the door to apologize because you were right or wrong. You're really apologizing for whatever reason. And this is a really hard concept for men to take in. For whatever reason you weren't on the same page with your partner, it's really in your best interest to figure out why you weren't on the same page, and ask her why you weren't on the same page. What went wrong? What can I do better? And those are never really asked. It's easier for guys just to say, look, I'm not gonna, leave her alone, let her calm down. And if they do knock on that door and they do say, look, let's try to get better on the same page, then you can continue with your life and continue. And I use that word Band-Aid on the cover because, in fact, when you don't really take it to that next level of saying we're not on the same page, and you ignore the fact, and then 3 days later you end up kind of apologizing, or you let it blow off, that is the Band-Aid, ignoring what actually happened and why it happened.
It's okay to say, I'm sorry, we had this disagreement. It's not really admitting wrongdoing, but it is acknowledging the fact that you feel bad, that she feels bad. And that kind of empathy, I think, actually builds and strengthens a relationship, don't you?
Absolutely. It actually is a cause of love to a partner. I mean, they actually see that as a sign of love. But it's, believe it or not, in most cases, it's not done. You know, men have a lot of pride and they don't think they did anything wrong. Or the alpha, if they don't think they did anything wrong in that relationship, why should they apologize, or why should they think they're admitting to something that they were right at? I mean, it's that whole sense that I'm never wrong. I'm always trying to work to be right. And so it's a rooted, inherited issue that we always try to do the right things, to think that we did the right thing. So why should we say we're wrong now? And that, again, I get it in a lot of cases, but you're with this individual daily. And why, for whatever reason, would you want your partner to go through any pain? That's the key. Why do you want your partner to go through any pain? For whatever reason. She didn't agree with you, did agree with you. I say, as a guy, again, alpha, chalk it up, own it. Just own that your partner's going through it.
Right.
Maybe she didn't see it, and just move on. And that's kind of what I talk. And I talk about this in the book detail into exercises. And let me walk through a little bit of this book for you.
Sure.
I created it really digestible. So the 4 mistakes I say in chapter 1. What do we do? How did we get this to a relationship we did? What? We get busy in our work, we get busy in our careers, we get busy in our sports, we get busy with our friends. And in a partnered relationship, we're not stopping enough for our partner. So our partner could see this as what we call I call it as an ignore or neglect part of the relationship. And I walk through how they process this and why they process this. And it's a process of non-love, believe it or not. And then I go into our false expectations. How many times does the alpha person get so wrapped up into what they're doing? They're working so hard on something that I'm going to be home in an hour, and all of a sudden it's 3 hours later. And a partner will go and sit back, and if you do that enough, and say yourself as a trusting guy, and you believe everything you say, you got to be able to trust me. I'm this great guy. But all of a sudden, your own partner looks at you and says, "I can never trust you again." And you're like, "Why? Me? Not trust me?" And the reality is that the trust comes based on you saying you're gonna be home in an hour and it's 3 hours later, and they see that as a lack of trust, a lack of you saying something and not doing it. And then I go into, what do? We white lie to avoid it, and the last is the false expectation, or the entitlement issues that typically alpha people tend to have in partnerships. So that's the chapter 1, and that's the baseline for where partnerships go bad. The other part, chapter 2, goes basically into the stages your partner goes through to be able to stay with you. They adjust, they go into selfish stages, you go into disrespect stages, and to the point where you get to the last stage, and it's really a stage of where you're fighting in public and everything, and you've lost all respect, credibility. And then I go into chapter 3 is really things we really never learned, the 101 dummies. Well, kind of 101. We really never learned how to communicate well. We don't have the patience and time usually to sit down for hours, or we don't have the time. And I say, look, you don't have the time. You don't have to spend hours. I say spend 10 minutes at the end of every day and just let your partner vent. Let them just unwind their day. And if you've heard it 10 times, let them unwind. That's how they connect with you. That's love is shared at that level. And then I talk about, ask the questions, ask your partner what's on her mind and what she's doing. And that's very seldom done in a partnership. And then you've got your communications, you've got the ask the questions, and you have the other 2 big ones, compromise. Compromise is a really big deal. I'm not going to pick up the kids, you pick up the kids. If things are made without a compromise, and it's not fair to the other partner in a lot of cases. And then make the right choices. You know, it's if your partner's been picking up the kids all week, you got to pick them up and make the choice. Say you're going to do it, or say you're going to go to the grocery. So that's kind of the chapter 1, where we don't make the right choices. We don't communicate properly. We don't, communicate properly, or communicate compromise properly. So the next section of the book gets into needs, really addressing needs that we have and that your partner has. I always tease from a guy standpoint. We know what we like, we know what we don't like, we know what we hate, we know what we suck at. We hate being nagged at, we hate to communicate. What do we need? We love to have downtime, we need to zone out, we love our hobbies, right? Those are our needs. And if those needs get interrupted, I hate begging for sex. We're not gonna say that live, but the reality is we hate it, and we're 45-year-old men begging. And I'm like, how's this possible? But the reality is, those are real things that take place. Your partner, I write as being the alpha, that's us. As being the non-alpha, they really want balance and love. They want equality, they want security, and they want trust. And I call it, you need to be the best. And when you don't meet those, it's a real problem. And so that's chapter 2, this section 2 of this. And then the last section, I really go into heavy with the tools to actually fix the problem. Like family, when you have an event with a family, ask your partner, the tool's called partner first. Bad habits, the tools, come on, pick your toenails up, just come on, pick your socks up. Nobody wants to do that.
Right.
So, but I also bring the questions to yourself to actually ask yourself, because in most cases we never really even thought about it. So and then I've got a workbook to this, and the workbook gets into baggage issue, real heavy baggage issues that we drag along, skeletons in the closet, and dual lives. A dual life doesn't have to be just a relationship. It could be you have a separate credit card because you don't want to tell your wife. But I get into in this I get into sibling issues, and I get into childhood issues, parent issues, and how they affect you. Because one of the things we never ask our partner is about their past. For example, you could be in an event and ask your wife to sing a holiday song. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you push her to sing because everybody's singing, and she just bursts crying when she goes into the room. You have no idea why. Come to find out, when you really dig deep, which nobody usually does, is she was told by her sister at 3 she was a terrible singer.
Right.
And believe it or not, that's childhood abuse. What you think is abuse, your brother has picked on you, your friends have picked on you, you've been bullied, they stay with us.
Right.
And they can be triggered at any moment. And hopefully sometimes we overcome them, but sometimes we don't. And they stay with you if they've never been addressed or acknowledged, or you've outgrown them, and they get triggered. Well, if they're in a relationship and your partner's never shared it and you just triggered a point, that's where a lot of guys go, I never understand my partner. I don't understand why she's mad. I can never make her happy. And it's because there's a lot of issues, a lot of underlying things going on. It could be the neglect, but it could also be some of these other underlying issues. And that's kind of how I walk people through this process.
But it's a great book. It's a great outline. It's problem solution, and there's a lot in between. You've gone through the outline of the book, but there's a lot of meat there on those bones. So it is a great read. Talking about male-female relationships, husband-wife relationships, do you think part of the problem is that we're wired differently, that women tend to be more emotional and men tend to be more rational? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we are absolutely wired differently. And I think that goes across. I think people are wired differently, period. And you can have I'm an emotional guy, and my wife's not as emotional as me. But really, it's your partner. So it's really your job to understand your partner, and it's understanding. And it's funny because I say to this emotional, this time you talk emotions, but really it's practical. if you really have, I could come into your home and take one page and ask your, if you're married or you got a partner, I could come in and ask all the issues that you've got, and they will write them down. And I promise you, if those issues, those are the same issues that will be 5 years from now. It could be how you handle your family. It could be how you handle your finances. It could be how you handle, drugs or your sex addictions. And by the way, I talk about drugs and sex addictions, that it's really up to your partner to what the limits are. If your partner says it's okay to do drugs, but all of a sudden you've exceeded a limit, then it's a problem, or gambling or any of these other issues. It's when your partner says it's a problem, it's a problem. Your partner is the only one to be accountable for, not your mother, not your parents, not anyone else. Now, when you hit these issues on this page of a partnership, of a relationship, of what your partner needs to be happy, emotional or non-emotional, and you meet those needs, you've now accomplished what your question was. And the question is, are we wired differently? And yes, your job is to understand how your partner is wired and then meet those needs.
Absolutely. It's a great book. It's called You're Right, I'm Wrong. If you say that phrase enough, it's going to help you. If you buy this book, download it, read it, order it, it's definitely going to help your relationship. Your marriage is the most important thing in your life. It determines the quality of your life. So why not invest in this book to take a look at what you can do better to make your relationship stronger? Jeff Marinelli, I'll leave you with this one thought. I've heard it said, and you kind of touched upon this, that most couples have the same fight over and over and over again. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I'm going to leave you by saying my wife is my life. Yeah. And that's kind of how I felt. And the arguments that people have over and over again, honestly, if they read this book and they find out that every morning they want to bring their wife a cup of coffee or the partner a cup of coffee, or they've had a hard day and bring them a glass of wine, the reality is, the thought I'm going to leave with people is, if you can make if your job in life is to make sure your partner's not stressed, so that every day your partner has something on her mind and you can just help there and kick in, you become the great partner. Yeah. That is the great partnership.
Absolutely. Beautiful thoughts, beautiful book, highly recommended. Jeff Marinelli, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.